The morning sun cast long shadows across Whitmore International Airport as Dr. Sarah Chen adjusted her worn leather flight jacket and stared at the sleek experimental aircraft sitting on the private runway. The X-47 Valkyrie looked more like a spacecraft than a conventional plane, its carbon fiber hull gleaming silver against the Texas sky. Around her, ground crews moved with the practiced efficiency of people who had spent months preparing for this moment. But Sarah barely noticed them. Her mind was focused on the impossible task ahead, breaking 7 different flight records in a single 24-hour period. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. What she didn't know was that 3,000 miles away, in a nondescript office building in Virginia, someone was already planning to make sure she never lived to see the next sunrise. The project had been Dr. Marcus Webb's brainchild. As director of Advanced Aerospace Research at Meridian Technologies, he had spent 5 years developing the Valkyrie's revolutionary propulsion system, a hybrid engine that could transition seamlessly from conventional jet power to something approaching scramjet speeds. The mathematics were beautiful, the engineering was flawless, and the potential applications were staggering. But Webb knew that in the current political climate, any breakthrough in hypersonic technology would immediately be classified and buried in black budget programs where it might never see practical application. That's why he had chosen Sarah Chen for the test program. At 34, she held more aviation records than any pilot in the past decade. She had broken the sound barrier in a home-built aircraft, set altitude records in experimental gliders, and established speed marks in everything from vintage warbirds to cutting-edge fighters. More importantly, she was uncompromised. No military connections, no government contracts, no corporate loyalties that could be leveraged to silence her. She was a pure aviator, someone who flew for the love of flight itself. Webb watched from the control tower as Sarah completed her pre-flight inspection. Even from a distance, he could see the meticulous attention to detail that had made her legendary in aviation circles. She checked every surface, every connection, every gauge with the thoroughness of someone who understood that, at the speed she would be flying, the smallest oversight could be fatal. The plan was ambitious to the point of seeming impossible. Over the next 24 hours, Sarah would attempt to break records for maximum speed, sustained speed, altitude, rate of climb, distance, endurance, and fuel efficiency. The Valkyrie had been designed specifically for this challenge, with revolutionary engines that could operate efficiently across an unprecedented range of flight parameters. If successful, the attempt would prove that American aerospace technology had leaped decades ahead of anything else in the world. In the hangar adjacent to the runway, a small group of witnesses had gathered. Aviation journalists, representatives from the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale, and officials from various aerospace companies sat in folding chairs, many of them skeptical that any pilot could achieve what Sarah was attempting. Record-breaking flights typically focused on a single parameter, speed or altitude or distance, because the aircraft modifications needed for one type of record usually made it impossible to achieve others. Among the observers, Dr. Elena Vasquez, from the National Transportation Safety Board, took notes with particular intensity. She had been assigned to monitor the flight for regulatory compliance, but her real mission was more complex. 3 days earlier, she had received a call from someone identifying himself only as a concerned citizen who suggested that the Valkyrie project might pose national security risks. The caller had provided detailed technical specifications that weren't supposed to be public knowledge, along with a suggestion that Dr. Vasquez might want to pay close attention to what happened during the record attempt. Sarah climbed into the Valkyrie's cockpit and immediately felt the aircraft's unusual character. The controls were intuitive but unfamiliar. The display showed information she had never seen before, and the engine instruments indicated power levels that seemed almost impossible. Webb had explained the basic principles of the hybrid propulsion system, but experiencing it firsthand was different. She could feel potential energy thrumming through the airframe like electricity through a wire. As she ran through the pre-start checklist, Sarah noticed something odd about the aircraft's computer systems. The navigation display showed waypoints for a flight plan she hadn't programmed, and the fuel management system indicated reserves, far beyond what should have been possible given the Valkyrie's fuel capacity. When she queried the system, it responded with a message she had never seen before. Secondary mission parameters loaded, awaiting pilot authorization. Before she could investigate further, Webb's voice crackled through her headset. "Sarah, we're showing all systems nominal from here. You're cleared for engine start when ready." She pushed the unusual display readings to the back of her mind and focused on the task ahead. The Valkyrie's engines came to life with a sound unlike anything she had ever heard, not the scream of a conventional jet, but something deeper and more resonant, like the Earth itself was humming in harmony with the machine. Meanwhile, in a secure conference room at the Pentagon, General Patricia Morrison was ending a phone call that would change everything. The caller had been Admiral James Fletcher, Director of Special Access Programs, and his message had been brief and urgent. The Valkyrie project represented a clear and present danger to national security. The technology being demonstrated could revolutionize not just civilian aviation, but military applications that were currently beyond imagination. If the flight was successful and the results became public, it would trigger an arms race that America might not win. Morrison had been in the military long enough to understand the subtext. The Valkyrie wasn't just an experimental aircraft. It was a glimpse into the future of hypersonic flight, and that future belonged in carefully controlled government programs, not in the hands of independent researchers who might share their discoveries with foreign competitors. The record attempt would have to be stopped, and Sarah Chen would have to be convinced that her country's security was more important than her personal ambitions. But General Morrison didn't know that Admiral Fletcher wasn't acting on behalf of national security. 3 months earlier, Fletcher had been approached by representatives of Titan Aerospace, Meridian Technologies' largest competitor, with an offer that had been impossible to refuse. Titan had been developing their own hypersonic propulsion system for nearly a decade, but they were still years away from achieving what the Valkyrie could accomplish today. If Sarah's record attempt succeeded, it would prove that Meridian had achieved a breakthrough that could destroy Titan's competitive position and cost them billions in defense contracts. Fletcher's orders to Morrison were simple: find a way to ground the Valkyrie before it could demonstrate its true capabilities. The specific method was left to her discretion, but the message was clear: failure was not an option. Back at Whitmore International, Sarah was taxiing toward the runway when her radio crackled with an unexpected transmission. "Valkyrie Experimental, this is Houston Center. Be advised we're showing unusual traffic in your area. Recommend you hold position for traffic analysis." Sarah frowned and looked at her instruments. Her radar showed clear skies in all directions, and Houston Center wasn't even responsible for traffic control in her area. She keyed her microphone. "Houston Center, Valkyrie Experimental. I'm showing no traffic, and you're outside your jurisdiction for this airport. Please clarify." There was a long pause before the response came, in a different voice than before. "Valkyrie Experimental, disregard previous transmission. You are cleared for takeoff at pilot's discretion." In the control tower, Webb was studying the radio transcripts with growing concern. The initial transmission from Houston Center had come through on a secure frequency that wasn't supposed to be accessible to civilian air traffic control. More troubling, when his team called Houston Center directly, they denied having any communication with the Valkyrie. Someone was monitoring their communications, and that someone had access to restricted radio frequencies, Dr. Vasquez noticed. Webb's expression and approached him with her own concerns. "Dr. Webb, I need to ask you something. Confidential. Have you shared the Valkyrie's technical specifications with anyone outside your immediate team?" Webb turned to look at her, and Vasquez could see genuine alarm in his eyes. "No, absolutely not. Those specifications are proprietary and potentially revolutionary. Why do you ask?" Vasquez lowered her voice. "Because someone called me 3 days ago with detailed knowledge of your propulsion system. They knew things about the Valkyrie that aren't in any of the public documentation. I think someone is monitoring this project very closely." Before Webb could respond, Sarah's voice came through the tower speakers. "Control tower, Valkyrie experimental requesting immediate takeoff clearance. I have green lights across the board, and I'm ready to make history." Webb looked at Vasquez, then at the Valkyrie sitting at the end of the runway like a silver arrow, pointed at the sky. Whatever forces were moving against them, they were out of time to investigate. Sarah had trained for 2 years for this moment. The aircraft was performing perfectly, and the weather conditions were ideal, if they were going. To prove what the Valkyrie could do, it had to be now. "Valkyrie experimental," Webb transmitted. "You are cleared for takeoff." "Good hunting, Sarah." The Valkyrie's acceleration was unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced. Within seconds of applying full power, she was pressed back into her seat with a force that seemed to double gravity itself. The runway disappeared beneath her in a blur of concrete and painted lines, and she was airborne in less than 1,000 feet. As she climbed through 5,000 feet, the aircraft's primary engines seamlessly transitioned to their high-altitude configuration, and Sarah felt the unmistakable sensation of being launched rather than merely flying. Her first target was the absolute speed record. The current mark stood at Mach 3, set by the SR-71 Blackbird more than 50 years earlier. The Valkyrie had been designed to exceed Mach 4, but Sarah knew that the real test would be whether the aircraft could maintain control at those speeds. Hypersonic flight was more art than science, requiring split-second adjustments to account for atmospheric conditions that changed faster than human reflexes could process. As she accelerated through Mach 2, Sarah noticed that the unusual navigation display had become more active. The waypoints she hadn't programmed were now showing distance and bearing information, as if the aircraft expected her to follow a specific route. More puzzling, the fuel management system was indicating that she had somehow gained fuel during the climb, which was physically impossible unless the Valkyrie's engines were somehow extracting energy from the atmosphere itself. At 30,000 feet in climbing, Sarah pushed the throttles forward and felt the aircraft transform. The conventional jet engines shut down completely, replaced by a propulsion system that seemed to bend the laws of physics. There was no vibration, no noise, just pure acceleration that pressed her deeper into her seat as the Valkyrie shot toward the edge of space. Below her, Webb was tracking the flight with instruments that were registering readings he had never seen before. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The Valkyrie wasn't just breaking records. It was rewriting the fundamental assumptions about what was possible in atmospheric flight. The aircraft's speed was increasing exponentially. Its fuel consumption was actually decreasing as it accelerated, and its radar signature had virtually disappeared. In Virginia, Admiral Fletcher was watching the same data feeds with growing alarm. The Valkyrie wasn't just an advanced aircraft. It was a technological revolution that would make every existing military aircraft obsolete overnight. If Sarah completed her record attempt and the results became public, it would trigger a fundamental shift in global power dynamics that could destabilize decades of carefully maintained military balance. Fletcher reached for his secure phone and placed a call that would set in motion events beyond anyone's control. "This is Admiral Fletcher," he said when the call was answered. Authorization code 7 Alpha 7. I need immediate deployment. Of the Aegis Protocol. The voice on the other end of the line was crisp and professional. Understood, Admiral. Target designation? Fletcher looked at his display showing the Valkyrie's position and trajectory. Experimental aircraft, tail. Number November 747, Whiskey. Pilot is Dr. Sarah Chen. Mission priority is national security containment. There was a brief pause. Admiral, are you requesting termination authority? Fletcher closed his eyes and made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Affirmative. Termination authority is approved. Make it look like an accident. High above Texas, Sarah was experiencing the flight of her life. The Valkyrie had exceeded Mach 4 and was still accelerating, climbing toward an altitude where the sky was beginning to turn black and the curvature of the Earth was visible through her canopy. The aircraft's handling remained perfect, responding to her inputs with a precision that seemed almost supernatural. But as she approached Mach 4.5, something began to change. The navigation display that had been showing mysterious waypoints suddenly activated with a new message. Warning, hostile tracking detected. Evasive protocols available. Pilot authorization required. Sarah felt her blood run cold. She was flying an unarmed experimental aircraft in unrestricted airspace over Texas. There should be no hostile tracking, no threats, no reason for the aircraft to suggest evasive maneuvers. But even as she tried to process what the warning meant, her radar warning receiver began chirping with a sound that every military pilot learned to fear, the distinctive tone that indicated someone had locked onto her aircraft with a weapons system. She keyed her radio immediately. Control tower, Valkyrie experimental. I'm showing hostile radar illumination. Do you have any military traffic in my area? Webb's response was immediate and alarmed. Negative, Valkyrie. We show no military aircraft within 200 miles of your position. Can you identify the source? Before Sarah could respond, her radar warning receiver exploded into a cacophony of alerts. Multiple tracking systems had locked onto her aircraft, and the computer was now displaying a message that made her heart race. Multiple missile launches detected. Impact in 90 seconds. Recommend immediate evasive action. For a moment, Sarah couldn't believe what she was seeing. Someone was actually trying to shoot her down. She was flying an experimental aircraft on a record-breaking attempt, and someone had decided that she represented enough of a threat to justify attempted murder. The realization was so shocking that she almost forgot to react to the immediate danger. But her training took over, and Sarah began the most desperate flying of her life. The Valkyrie responded to her inputs like a living thing, rolling and diving and climbing with an agility that seemed impossible for any aircraft. The mysterious propulsion system that had puzzled her during climb out now revealed its true purpose. It could provide thrust vectoring and acceleration profiles that allowed the aircraft to maneuver like a fighter jet while maintaining the speed of a hypersonic missile. On the ground, Webb was frantically trying to coordinate with air traffic control and military authorities to understand what was happening. The radar screens showed Sarah's aircraft performing maneuvers that defied explanation, while multiple unidentified contacts appeared to be pursuing her. When he finally reached someone at NORAD who would talk to him, the conversation was brief and terrifying. Dr. Webb, this is Colonel Anderson at NORAD. We're tracking your experimental aircraft, and we need you to understand that it may have been classified as a national security threat. We're recommending immediate landing at the nearest military facility. Webb's voice rose with anger and disbelief. Colonel, that aircraft is unarmed and operating under full civilian authority. What possible national security threat could it represent? There was a long pause before Anderson responded. Sir, the technology your aircraft is demonstrating could revolutionize military aviation. If that technology were to fall into the wrong hands, it could shift the global balance of power overnight. "I'm sorry, but the decision has been made at the highest levels." Webb understood immediately what Anderson wasn't saying directly. The Valkyrie's performance had exceeded even their most optimistic projections, and someone in the government had decided that the technology was too dangerous to remain in civilian hands. They were trying to force Sarah to land so they could seize the aircraft and classify the entire project. But Webb also understood something that the military officials didn't. The Valkyrie's navigation system hadn't just been programmed for record-breaking flights. 3 years earlier, when it became clear that the aircraft's capabilities might attract unwanted government attention, Webb had worked with a small team of programmers to install what they called the Phoenix Protocol, a set of defensive systems and escape routes designed to protect the aircraft and its pilot if political forces tried to suppress their work. He reached for his secure radio and transmitted on a frequency that only Sarah's aircraft could receive. "Sarah, this is Webb on Phoenix Channel. Do you copy?" High above Texas, Sarah heard Webb's transmission through a communication system she hadn't known existed. "Webb, I copy on Phoenix Channel. I'm currently evading multiple missile threats and I need immediate guidance." "Sarah, the aircraft has defensive capabilities you weren't briefed on. Access the Phoenix menu through the navigation system. The aircraft can protect itself, but you have to authorize it to take action." Sarah's fingers flew over the navigation controls, and suddenly a new set of options appeared on her display. The Valkyrie wasn't just an experimental aircraft. It was a defensive system designed to protect advanced technology from hostile forces. The mysterious fuel efficiency she had noticed earlier was actually an atmospheric energy collection system that gave the aircraft virtually unlimited range. The impossible maneuverability was the result of thrust vectoring systems that had been hidden in the aircraft's design. And the radar transparent characteristics were the product of stealth technology that made the aircraft nearly invisible when fully activated. As she enabled the Phoenix Protocol, Sarah felt the Valkyrie transform around her. The aircraft's stealth systems engaged completely, making it disappear from hostile tracking systems, while its defensive countermeasures deployed chaff and flares that confused the incoming missiles. But more importantly, the aircraft's navigation system began plotting a course toward a destination that Webb had hoped they would never need to use. Before she could comprehend all the implications of what was happening, Sarah found herself flying toward coordinates that would take her far from Texas, toward a place where the truth about the Valkyrie's capabilities could be revealed to the world, without government interference. The woman who had started the day hoping to break aviation records was now flying for her life, carrying technology that could change the world if she could survive long enough to share it. Below her, Webb was making the most difficult decision of his career. The Phoenix Protocol had been designed as a last resort, a way to preserve the Valkyrie's technology if political forces tried to suppress it. But activating it meant that Sarah would be branded as a fugitive, that Meridian Technologies would be destroyed by government retaliation, and that he himself would likely spend the rest of his life in federal prison. But as he watched the radar screens showing Sarah's desperate evasion of military missiles, Webb realized that the choice had already been made for him. The government had decided that the Valkyrie's technology was too dangerous for civilian control, and they were willing to commit murder to seize it. If Sarah was going to survive, if the world was going to benefit from the breakthrough they had achieved, then the Phoenix Protocol was their only hope. He reached for his phone to make a call that would alert journalists and aviation authorities around the world that something extraordinary was happening in the skies above Texas. The record-breaking flight that had started as a celebration of human achievement was now becoming a desperate race for survival, with the future of aviation technology hanging in the balance. High above the clouds, Sarah Chen was no longer just trying to break records. She was fighting for her life, flying an aircraft that defied everything she thought she knew about the laws of physics, pursued by forces that would stop at nothing. to bury the truth about what American ingenuity could achieve when freed from political constraints. The woman who had taken off that morning hoping to make aviation history was now living it in ways she had never imagined, carrying the future of flight itself toward a destination that only the Valkyrie's hidden systems knew how to reach. Dr. Sarah Chen had always known that flying the Valkyrie would be different from anything she had experienced before. But as she streaked through the stratosphere at speeds that made the sound barrier seem like a gentle suggestion, she began to understand that this aircraft represented something far more revolutionary than advanced engineering. The Phoenix Protocol had transformed her experimental record-breaking flight into something approaching science fiction, and every minute that passed brought new revelations about what Webb's team had actually created. The navigation system was now displaying information that seemed impossible. According to the aircraft's computers, she had broken the absolute speed record 20 minutes into the flight, reaching Mach 4.7 while maintaining perfect control and actually improving fuel efficiency. The altitude record had fallen next as the Valkyrie climbed to 85,000 feet without any of the handling difficulties that typically plagued aircraft at the edge of space. Most remarkably, the fuel consumption readings indicated that the aircraft was somehow extracting energy from the thin atmosphere at extreme altitude, converting high-speed flight into additional range rather than depleting its reserves. But the records were becoming secondary to survival. The defensive systems that had engaged automatically when hostile tracking was detected were unlike anything in conventional military aviation. The Valkyrie could generate electronic interference that confused radar systems, deploy countermeasures that defeated missile guidance systems, and most impressively, alter its radar signature so dramatically that it could appear and disappear from tracking screens at will. Sarah was beginning to understand that the aircraft she was flying represented a technological leap so significant that it threatened to make every existing military aircraft obsolete overnight. The hybrid propulsion system didn't just provide improved performance, it represented a fundamentally different approach to atmospheric flight that could revolutionize everything from commercial aviation to space exploration. As she followed the navigation system's guidance toward coordinates that remained mysterious, Sarah realized that she was no longer just a test pilot trying to break records. She had become the guardian of technology that could reshape global power structures, and there were people willing to commit murder to prevent that technology from reaching the public. The radio crackled with Webb's voice on the Phoenix frequency. "Sarah, how are you handling the aircraft's defensive capabilities?" "Webb, this is unlike anything I've ever experienced. The aircraft is practically flying itself through evasive maneuvers, and I'm showing capabilities that weren't in any of the briefings. What exactly did you build?" There was a long pause before Webb responded, and when he did, his voice carried the weight of secrets that had been hidden for years. "Sarah, what I'm about to tell you will change your understanding of this entire project. The Valkyrie isn't just an experimental aircraft. It's a proof of concept for technology that could provide unlimited clean energy, revolutionize space travel, and eliminate the strategic advantage of nuclear weapons." Sarah felt the implications of Webb's words sink in as she continued to follow the navigation system's guidance. She was flying an aircraft that represented not just advances in aviation, but breakthroughs in fundamental physics that could transform human civilization. And someone in the government had decided that technology was too dangerous to remain in civilian hands. "Webb, where is this navigation system taking me?" "To a place where we can reveal the truth without interference." "Sarah, there are journalists, scientists, and government officials around the world who need to see what the Valkyrie can do. But first, we need to make sure you survive long enough to demonstrate it." The aircraft's defensive systems were continuing to track multiple hostile contacts, but the threats seemed to be falling behind as the Valkyrie's speed and stealth capabilities allowed it to outrun conventional interceptors. Sarah was approaching a level of flight performance that seemed to bend the laws of physics, maintaining hypersonic speeds while maneuvering with the agility of a fighter aircraft. Below her, the landscape was changing as the navigation system guided her away from the familiar territory of Texas toward mountainous terrain that she didn't recognize. The flight plan seemed to be taking her toward coordinates in Colorado, but the specific destination remained encrypted in the aircraft systems. As she flew deeper into the mystery of what the Valkyrie represented, Sarah began to understand that breaking aviation records had been only the beginning. She was now carrying the future of human technological development toward a destination where truth could survive the political forces that were trying to suppress it. The woman who had started the day hoping to make aviation history was now living through a transformation that would change not just her own life, but potentially the course of human civilization itself. The Valkyrie was more than an experimental aircraft. It was a glimpse into a future where the impossible had become routine, and Sarah Chen was the person chosen to deliver that future to a world that might not be ready to receive it. Behind her, the forces trying to stop her were regrouping and adapting, but ahead lay a destination that promised answers to questions she was only beginning to understand how to ask. The flight that had started as a record-breaking attempt was becoming something approaching a mission to preserve the future of human progress itself. The coordinates embedded in the Valkyrie's navigation system led Sarah across the American heartland at speeds that turned the landscape below into an abstract painting of greens and browns. As she crossed into Colorado airspace, the aircraft's systems began revealing additional capabilities that made her question everything she thought she understood about the laws of physics. The fuel efficiency readings had moved beyond impossible into the realm of the absurd. According to her instruments, the Valkyrie was now generating more energy than it consumed, effectively creating a perpetual motion system that violated the fundamental principles of thermodynamics. Dr. Marcus Webb was coordinating the most complex cover-up operation of his career from his control room at Whitmore International. News of Sarah's flight had begun leaking to aviation communities around the world, and early reports were describing aircraft performance that sounded more like science fiction than experimental aviation. Webb knew that within hours, every intelligence agency on the planet would be trying to understand what the Valkyrie represented, and most of them would conclude that American aerospace technology had achieved a breakthrough that threatened the global balance of power. Webb's secure communications were flooded with calls from government officials demanding immediate information about the Valkyrie's capabilities. The Secretary of Defense wanted technical specifications. The CIA was requesting access to all project files, and the National Security Council was demanding that Sarah be ordered to land immediately at the nearest military facility. But Webb also knew that complying with any of these demands would result in the immediate classification and burial of technology that could revolutionize human civilization. He had spent 3 years preparing for this moment, building relationships with journalists, scientists, and government officials around the world who could help protect the Valkyrie's secrets from political suppression. The Phoenix Protocol wasn't just an escape plan for Sarah. It was a comprehensive strategy for ensuring that breakthrough technology couldn't be hidden by bureaucratic classification systems. Webb activated secure communication links to contacts in 12 different countries, transmitting encrypted data packages that contained enough technical information about the Valkyrie to prevent any single government from claiming exclusive control over the technology. If the American military establishment wanted to classify the project, they would discover that the most important secrets had already been distributed to allies and competitors alike. Meanwhile, Admiral Fletcher was discovering that his attempt to contain the Valkyrie had triggered consequences far beyond his original plans. The missile attack on Sarah's aircraft had been detected by multiple radar installations, and military personnel at several bases were asking uncomfortable questions. about why an experimental civilian aircraft had been targeted by weapon systems. Fletcher's authorization codes were being scrutinized by oversight committees that he had hoped would never become involved. More troubling, the Valkyrie's defensive capabilities had been far more sophisticated than anyone anticipated. The aircraft hadn't just evaded the missile attack, it had recorded detailed information about the weapon systems used against it, including launch coordinates, guidance frequencies, and command authorization codes. If that information reached the wrong people, it could expose the entire Aegis protocol and reveal how defense contractors were using military assets for corporate purposes. Fletcher realized that his attempt to eliminate Sarah Chen had actually created a much larger problem. The Valkyrie was now carrying evidence of illegal military operations, flying toward an unknown destination where that evidence could be used to destroy careers and expose corruption at the highest levels of government. What had started as a simple corporate favor had become a national security nightmare that threatened to unravel decades of carefully constructed secrecy. High above the Colorado Rockies, Sarah was experiencing flight performance that redefined her understanding of what aircraft could accomplish. The Valkyrie was maintaining Mach 5.2 at an altitude of 90,000 feet, operating in atmospheric conditions so thin that conventional engines would flame out instantly. But the aircraft's hybrid propulsion system was actually becoming more efficient as atmospheric density decreased, extracting energy from cosmic radiation and solar wind in ways that seemed to violate basic physics. The navigation system was guiding her toward coordinates in a remote mountain valley that didn't appear on any civilian maps. As she approached the destination, Sarah could see what appeared to be a small airport nestled between peaks that rose more than 14,000 feet above sea level. The runway was barely visible against the rocky terrain, camouflaged so effectively that she might have missed it entirely without the Valkyrie's guidance systems. As she began her descent toward the mysterious airfield, Sarah's radio crackled. With a transmission from someone who had been waiting for her arrival. "Valkyrie Experimental, this is Mountain Base Control. You are cleared for landing on runway 07. Welcome to the future, Dr. Chen." The voice was unfamiliar, but something about its tone suggested that whoever was speaking had been expecting her arrival for some time. Sarah keyed her microphone as she configured the aircraft for landing. "Mountain Base Control, this is Dr. Chen. Can you explain what this facility is and why my aircraft's navigation system brought me here?" "Dr. Chen, all your questions will be answered once you're on the ground. But I can tell you that you're about to meet people who have been working to protect breakthrough technology from political suppression for more than a decade. The Valkyrie isn't the first revolutionary aircraft to find sanctuary here." As Sarah touched down on the mountain runway, she could see several other aircraft parked in what appeared to be natural caves carved into the mountainside. Some of the aircraft were clearly experimental, with configurations she had never seen before, while others appeared to be modified versions of conventional planes that had been enhanced with technology that shouldn't have existed. The Valkyrie's engine spooled down as she taxied toward the cave hangar, but the aircraft's computer systems remained active, displaying information about the facility that seemed to come from a database she hadn't known existed. According to the data, Mountain Base was an independent research facility operated by a consortium of scientists and engineers who had been forced to work outside official channels to develop technology that governments preferred to suppress. As the Valkyrie came to a stop inside the cave hangar, Sarah could see a group of people approaching her aircraft. They moved with the purposeful efficiency of experienced aviation professionals, but their clothing and equipment suggested that this wasn't a military or government facility. These were civilians who had chosen to work in secret rather than submit their discoveries to bureaucratic control. The aircraft's canopy opened automatically, and Sarah climbed down from the cockpit to meet the people who had been waiting for her arrival. The group was led by a woman in her 60s whose bearing suggested decades of experience in aerospace engineering. She approached Sarah with the confident smile of someone who had been anticipating this moment for years. "Dr. Chen, my name is Professor Janet Morrison, and I'm the director of the Mountain Base Research Consortium. We've been monitoring your flight since you left Texas, and I have to say that the Valkyrie's performance exceeded even our most optimistic projections." Sarah looked around the cave hangar, taking in the sight of aircraft that represented technology she couldn't immediately classify. "Professor Morrison, I'm beginning to understand that I don't know nearly as much about the Valkyrie as I thought I did. Can you explain what this place is and why my aircraft's navigation system brought me here?" Morrison gestured toward the other aircraft in the hangar. "Dr. Chen, what you see here represents more than 20 years of breakthrough research that has been suppressed by governments around the world. Every aircraft in this facility was developed by scientists and engineers who discovered that their work was considered too dangerous for public knowledge." As they walked deeper into the facility, Morrison explained the history of Mountain Base and the consortium of researchers who had created it. The facility had been established in the early 2000s by scientists whose work in advanced propulsion, energy generation, and material science had been classified by governments that preferred to control breakthrough technology rather than allow it to benefit humanity. The researchers had discovered that truly revolutionary advances in aerospace technology were routinely buried in classified programs, where they could be developed for military applications while being denied to civilian science. Rather than accept this suppression, they had chosen to work independently, developing technology that could demonstrate the potential for advances that political systems were trying to hide. The Valkyrie represents the culmination of decades of independent research into what we call atmospheric energy extraction, Morrison explained as they entered a laboratory filled with equipment that seemed more advanced than anything Sarah had seen in conventional aerospace facilities. Dr. Webb's team achieved something that we've been working toward for 15 years, an aircraft that can extract more energy from its environment than it consumes in operation. Sarah studied the laboratory equipment, trying to understand the implications of what Morrison was describing. "Professor, are you saying that the Valkyrie has somehow achieved perpetual motion?" Morrison smiled at the question. "Not perpetual motion in the classical sense, but something that has the same practical effect. The aircraft's propulsion system can extract energy from atmospheric particles, solar radiation, cosmic rays, and even the planet's magnetic field. At high altitude and high speed, it becomes a net energy producer rather than a consumer." The implications of Morrison's explanation were staggering. If the Valkyrie could generate more energy than it consumed, the technology could be applied to ground-based power generation, space exploration, and transportation systems that would revolutionize human civilization. But Sarah was beginning to understand why government officials had been willing to commit murder to suppress the technology. "Professor, if this technology became public knowledge, it would eliminate the strategic value of oil reserves, natural gas deposits, and nuclear power systems. Entire economies would be transformed overnight." Morrison nodded grimly. "Which is exactly why every government on Earth wants to control it. The Valkyrie doesn't just represent an advance in aviation. It represents a potential end to energy scarcity and the political systems that depend on controlling energy resources." As they continued through the facility, Morrison introduced Sarah to other researchers who had brought their own suppressed technologies to Mountain Base. There were engineers who had developed room-temperature superconductors, physicists who had achieved controlled nuclear fusion in desktop reactors, and computer scientists who had created artificial intelligence systems that exceeded anything publicly acknowledged. Each researcher had a similar story of discovering breakthrough technology that was immediately classified by government agencies, leading them to choose between abandoning their work or continuing it in secret. Mountain Base had become a sanctuary for science that political systems considered too dangerous for public knowledge. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a physicist who had developed a fusion reactor the size of a briefcase, explained the consortium's philosophy. As she showed Sarah through her laboratory, "We believe that scientific knowledge belongs to humanity, not to governments or corporations that want to control it for political advantage. The technologies we've developed here could solve energy poverty, eliminate pollution, and open space exploration to civilian science. But those same technologies threaten existing power structures that depend on scarcity and controlled access to resources." Sarah was beginning to understand that her record-breaking flight had been more than a demonstration of aircraft performance. It had been a proof of concept for technology that could fundamentally alter human civilization. The Valkyrie's energy extraction capabilities weren't just an engineering achievement. They represented a potential solution to some of humanity's most pressing challenges. But she was also beginning to understand the magnitude of the forces arrayed against such technology. Governments, corporations, and military establishments around the world had invested trillions of dollars in systems that assumed energy scarcity and technological limitations. The widespread adoption of atmospheric energy extraction could make those investments worthless overnight. Morrison led Sarah to a secure communication center where she could contact Webb and coordinate the next phase of their strategy. The Phoenix Protocol hadn't just been designed to protect the Valkyrie, it had been created to ensure that breakthrough technology could be revealed to the world in a way that prevented any single government from suppressing it. "Dr. Chen," Morrison said as they entered the communication center, "your flight today proved that atmospheric energy extraction is not just theoretically possible, it's practically achievable with current technology. Now we need to make sure that proof reaches the scientific community before political forces can bury it." The communication center contained equipment that could transmit encrypted data to research institutions around the world simultaneously, ensuring that the Valkyrie's technical specifications would be available to scientists in dozens of countries within hours. But Morrison also explained that such a massive data release would trigger immediate retaliation from governments that preferred to control breakthrough technology. "Dr. Chen, if we proceed with global data release, you'll become the most wanted person on the planet. Every intelligence agency will try to capture you. Every military will try to seize the Valkyrie. And every corporation threatened by the technology will try to eliminate you. Are you prepared for that level of consequence?" Sarah looked around the communication center, thinking about the implications of Morrison's question. She had started the day hoping to break a few aviation records and demonstrate advanced aircraft performance. Now she was being asked to make a decision that could reshape human civilization, while making her a permanent target of the most powerful institutions on Earth. But as she considered the choice, Sarah realized that it wasn't really a choice at all. The technology existed, its potential was proven, and its benefits could transform life for billions of people. The only question was whether those benefits would be suppressed by political systems that preferred to maintain control through scarcity, or whether they would be shared with the scientific community that could develop them for humanitarian purposes. "Professor Morrison, how do we proceed with the data release?" Morrison smiled and began entering commands into the communication system. "Dr. Chen, we proceed very carefully, very quickly, and with the understanding that we're about to start a technological revolution that will change everything." As the data transmission began, Sarah understood that her record-breaking flight had become something far more significant than she had ever imagined. The woman who had taken off that morning, hoping to demonstrate advanced aircraft performance, was now becoming the catalyst for a transformation that could alter the course of human development itself. Meanwhile, back at Whitmore International, Webb was coordinating with contacts around the world to ensure that the Valkyrie's technology would survive any attempt at political suppression. The Phoenix Protocol was designed around the principle that breakthrough science belonged to humanity rather than to governments or corporations that wanted to control it for advantage. But Webb also knew that the forces arrayed against them were prepared to use any means necessary to suppress technology that threatened existing power structures. The next few hours would determine whether the Valkyrie's atmospheric energy extraction capabilities would become the foundation for a new era of human prosperity, or whether they would be buried in classified programs where they could be developed for military purposes while being denied to civilian science. The battle for the future of human technology was about to begin, and Sarah Chen had become its most important combatant simply by proving that the impossible was not only possible, but practically achievable with current engineering knowledge. The flight that had started as a record-breaking attempt was becoming a war for the future of human civilization itself. The global data transmission from Mountain Base triggered responses that exceeded even Professor Morrison's most pessimistic projections. Within 6 hours of the Valkyrie's technical specifications reaching research institutions worldwide, emergency sessions were being convened at the United Nations. The Pentagon was implementing its highest level of crisis protocols, and stock markets from New York to Tokyo were experiencing unprecedented volatility as investors tried to understand the implications of atmospheric energy extraction technology. Dr. Sarah Chen watched the world's reaction unfold from Mountain Base's secure communication center, where screens displayed real-time feeds from news networks, government agencies, and scientific institutions around the globe. The footage was surreal. She could see her own image being broadcast on every major news network, identified as either a revolutionary hero who had liberated humanity's future or a dangerous terrorist who had stolen classified technology and threatened global stability. The reaction from the scientific community was immediate and overwhelming. Research institutions from MIT to CERN were announcing crash programs to replicate and expand upon the Valkyrie's atmospheric energy extraction capabilities. Universities were reporting that their physics departments had been flooded with requests from graduate students wanting to work on projects related to what was already being called the Chen effect, named after the pilot who had first demonstrated its practical application. But the political reaction was even more dramatic. The president had been awakened at 4 a.m. with news that American aerospace technology had achieved a breakthrough that could fundamentally alter global power structures. The Secretary of Energy was demanding immediate access to all research data, while the Secretary of Defense was arguing that the technology represented a clear threat to national security that required immediate military control. Admiral Fletcher found himself at the center of a crisis that had spiraled far beyond his original corporate loyalties. The unauthorized missile attack on Sarah's aircraft had been traced back to his authorization codes, and congressional oversight committees were demanding explanations for why civilian researchers had been targeted by military weapons systems. The Aegis protocol that he had used to justify the attack was being scrutinized by investigators, who were discovering that it had been used repeatedly to suppress technological developments that threatened corporate interests. More damaging, the Valkyrie's defensive systems had recorded everything about the missile attack, including the specific authorization codes, launch coordinates, and communication frequencies used by Fletcher's operatives. That information was now in the hands of journalists who were asking uncomfortable questions about how military assets were being used to protect corporate monopolies. Fletcher's secure phone rang with a call from Senator Patricia Harrison, chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee. "Admiral, I need you to explain to me how an experimental civilian aircraft ended up being targeted by military weapons systems. And I need that explanation to be very convincing, because right now it looks like you authorized an assassination attempt against an American citizen to protect corporate interests." Fletcher struggled to find words that could justify his actions without revealing the full extent of his involvement with Titan Aerospace. "Senator, The technology being demonstrated by that aircraft represents a clear threat to national security. If atmospheric energy extraction capabilities were to fall into hostile hands, it could destabilize global power balances that have maintained peace for decades. Senator Harrison's response was sharp and skeptical. "Admiral, that's an interesting theory, but it doesn't explain why you felt authorized to shoot down an American citizen without due process. It also doesn't explain why the attack was coordinated with representatives of Titan Aerospace, who seem to have had advanced knowledge of your military operations." The revelation that Fletcher's connection to Titan Aerospace had been discovered sent cold fear through his entire body. If congressional investigators had uncovered his corporate relationships, they would soon discover the full extent of how defense contractors had been using military assets to suppress competing technologies. The Valkyrie crisis was exposing decades of corruption that had hidden behind national security classifications. Meanwhile, at Mountain Base, Professor Morrison was coordinating the most ambitious scientific collaboration in human history. The data transmission had reached research institutions in 47 countries, and preliminary analysis was confirming that the Valkyrie's atmospheric energy extraction represented a reproducible breakthrough that could be scaled up for ground-based power generation. Dr. Elena Rodriguez was working with colleagues at universities around the world to design prototype atmospheric energy collectors that could provide unlimited clean power for civilian use. The physics were complex, but achievable high-altitude installations could extract energy from cosmic radiation, solar wind, and atmospheric particle interactions in ways that provided net positive energy generation. "Sarah," Rodriguez said, as she showed preliminary designs from research teams in Germany, Japan, and Australia, "what you demonstrated today isn't just an advancement in aviation technology. You've proven that humanity can achieve energy independence from fossil fuels, nuclear power, and every other scarcity-based system that currently controls global economics." The implications were staggering to consider. Atmospheric energy extraction could provide unlimited clean power for developing nations, eliminate the strategic importance of oil reserves, and make space exploration economically viable by providing unlimited fuel for spacecraft that could extract energy from their environment. But those same implications explained why powerful interests were willing to commit murder to suppress the technology. Sarah was studying global reaction feeds when Morrison approached with news that changed everything about their situation. "Dr. Chen, we're receiving reports that military units from several countries are mobilizing toward this location. It appears that governments around the world have decided that Mountain Base represents too significant a threat to be allowed to continue operating." The screens in the communication center showed satellite imagery of military convoys moving through Colorado, aircraft being repositioned at bases throughout the region, and special operations teams being deployed from facilities that officially didn't exist. The global revelation of atmospheric energy extraction had triggered coordinated action by every major military power to seize control of the technology before it could spread further. "Professor, how long do we have before they reach us?" Morrison consulted with her security team before responding. "Based on current movement patterns, we have perhaps 6 hours before the first units arrive." But Sarah, this was always anticipated as a possibility. Mountain Base wasn't just designed as a research facility. It was built to survive exactly this kind of coordinated suppression attempt. As Morrison led Sarah deeper into the mountain facility, she revealed defensive capabilities that seemed as advanced as anything in the aircraft hangars. The entire complex was hardened against electromagnetic pulse attacks, protected by active camouflage systems that could make it invisible to satellite surveillance, and equipped with its own atmospheric energy extraction systems that provided unlimited power for defensive operations. But more importantly, Mountain Base contained fabrication facilities that had been producing prototype atmospheric energy collectors for more than a year. Morrison's team had anticipated that proving the technology's effectiveness would trigger immediate suppression attempts, so they had prepared to distribute working prototypes to research institutions around the world before military forces could prevent the technology's spread. Sarah, within the next 4 hours, atmospheric energy prototypes will be simultaneously activated at universities on 6 continents. Even if they manage to destroy Mountain Base and seize the Valkyrie, the technology will already be established in enough locations to prevent complete suppression. The strategy was elegant in its simplicity. Rather than trying to protect a single location, Morrison's team had prepared to spread the technology so widely that no coordinated military action could contain it. The Valkyrie's demonstration flight had been the proof of concept that triggered global distribution of a revolution that was already prepared to happen. But Sarah also understood that her role in the process had made her the primary target of every intelligence agency on the planet. The woman who had demonstrated atmospheric energy extraction would be hunted by forces that considered her knowledge too dangerous to be allowed to survive. Her choice was simple: remain hidden at Mountain Base and hope that the facility's defenses could protect her indefinitely, or find a way to continue her work while staying ahead of the global manhunt that was about to begin. As if reading her thoughts, Morrison led Sarah to another hangar where a second aircraft sat waiting. This one was clearly based on the Valkyrie's design, but incorporated modifications that made it appear even more advanced than the original. The sleek craft seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and its configuration suggested capabilities that extended far beyond atmospheric flight. Dr. Chen, meet the Phoenix. It incorporates everything we've learned from monitoring the Valkyrie's performance, plus improvements that we've been developing for situations exactly like this one. The Phoenix can operate in space as effectively as an atmosphere. It's completely invisible to all known detection systems, and its range is theoretically unlimited. Sarah studied the Phoenix with growing amazement. The aircraft represented technology that seemed decades ahead of anything she had imagined possible, yet it had been built by the same team of independent researchers who had created the sanctuary. At Mountain Base, the implications were clear: breakthrough technology wasn't being suppressed because it was impossible to achieve, but because it threatened existing power structures that depended on controlling scarce resources. Professor, where would I go in an aircraft like this? Morrison smiled with the expression of someone who had been planning for this moment for years. Everywhere, Dr. Chen. The Phoenix Protocol isn't just about protecting breakthrough technology. It's about establishing a global network of independent research facilities that can operate beyond the reach of any single government or corporation. There are locations around the world where atmospheric energy extraction can be developed and deployed without political interference. As Sarah prepared to transfer to the Phoenix, she understood that her record-breaking flight had transformed into something approaching a mission to preserve the future of human technological development. The atmospheric energy extraction that she had demonstrated wasn't just an advancement in aviation, it was the key to unlimited clean energy, practical space exploration, and economic systems that could function without scarcity-based control mechanisms. But achieving that future required establishing research and development capabilities that could survive coordinated suppression attempts by every major military power on Earth. The Phoenix represented not just an escape vehicle, but a mobile research platform that could continue developing atmospheric energy technology while remaining beyond the reach of forces that preferred to control breakthrough science rather than allow it to benefit humanity. The transfer from the Valkyrie to the Phoenix took less than 30 minutes, but in that time Sarah could see military aircraft beginning to appear on the horizon. The coordinated response to atmospheric energy extraction was mobilizing faster than Morrison's team had anticipated, and it was becoming clear that Mountain Base would soon be under siege by forces that considered the technology too dangerous to be allowed to exist in civilian hands. As Sarah powered up the Phoenix's systems, She was amazed to discover that the aircraft's capabilities exceeded even the Valkyrie's revolutionary performance. The navigation system showed potential destinations on every continent. The propulsion systems indicated virtually unlimited range and speed, and the defensive capabilities suggested that the aircraft could survive in environments that would destroy conventional planes. But most importantly, the Phoenix contained fabrication equipment that could produce atmospheric energy extraction prototypes anywhere in the world. Sarah wasn't just escaping from Mountain Base. She was becoming a mobile research and development facility that could establish atmospheric energy technology in locations where it could be protected and developed without political interference. Morrison's voice crackled through the Phoenix's communication system as Sarah prepared for takeoff. "Dr. Chen, you're about to become the most wanted person on Earth, but you're also becoming humanity's best hope for achieving true energy independence. The technology you've proven can eliminate poverty, clean up environmental damage, and open space exploration to civilian science. But only if it can survive the next few years of suppression attempts." As the Phoenix lifted off from Mountain Base's hidden runway, Sarah could see military helicopters approaching the facility from multiple directions. The coordinated response was impressive in its scope and speed, but it was also arriving too late to prevent the global distribution of atmospheric energy technology that Morrison's team had prepared. High above the Colorado mountains, Sarah watched as the first atmospheric energy prototypes came online at universities around the world. The live feeds showed successful power generation at facilities from Stockholm to Singapore, proving that the technology could be replicated and scaled up for practical applications. Even if every government on Earth succeeded in classifying and suppressing official research, the basic principles were now established in enough locations to ensure continued development. But Sarah also understood that her role in the process had made her a permanent target of forces that would stop at nothing to control breakthrough technology. The Phoenix gave her the capability to stay ahead of any pursuit, but it also meant that she would spend the rest of her life as a fugitive from every major intelligence agency on the planet. As she flew toward coordinates that would take her to the first of many hidden research facilities around the world, Sarah reflected on how completely her life had changed in the span of a single day. She had started the morning hoping to break a few aviation records and demonstrate advanced aircraft performance. Now she was carrying the future of human energy independence toward destinations where it could be protected and developed, despite the opposition of every major military power on Earth. The woman who had taken off from Whitmore International, hoping to make aviation history, had become something far more significant, the guardian of technology that could transform human civilization, flying an aircraft that represented capabilities beyond anything publicly acknowledged, toward a future where breakthrough science could survive the political forces that preferred to suppress it rather than allow it to benefit humanity. Behind her, the forces trying to control atmospheric energy extraction were discovering that they were already too late. The technology had been proven, distributed, and established in enough locations to prevent complete suppression. The revolution that Sarah had triggered with her record-breaking flight was already spreading beyond the reach of any single government or corporation to contain. 2 years after the day that became known as the Great Flight, Dr. Sarah Chen sat in a research facility hidden beneath the Antarctic ice, watching as the final atmospheric energy extraction plant came online in what had once been one of the world's most energy-poor regions. The global transformation that had begun with her attempt to break aviation records had exceeded every optimistic projection about how quickly breakthrough technology could reshape human civilization. The Phoenix had proven to be everything that Professor Morrison had promised and more. Over the past 24 months, Sarah had visited 47 different research facilities on 6 continents, each one developing aspects of atmospheric energy technology that were being shared through encrypted networks that no government had been able to penetrate completely. The aircraft's unlimited range and invisibility to detection systems had made it possible to establish a truly global research network that operated beyond the control of any single political authority. The economic implications of unlimited clean energy had been as dramatic as Morrison's team had predicted. Oil prices had collapsed as atmospheric energy plants provided cheaper power than fossil fuel systems. Nuclear power had become economically obsolete overnight, and developing nations had achieved energy independence that freed them from dependence on resource-rich countries that had previously controlled global energy markets. But perhaps more importantly, the space exploration applications of atmospheric energy extraction had opened the solar system to human expansion in ways that had seemed impossible just 2 years earlier. Spacecraft equipped with atmospheric energy collectors could extract fuel and power from any planetary atmosphere, making missions to Mars, Jupiter's moons, and the asteroid belt economically viable for the first time in human history. Sarah's secure communication system chimed with an encrypted message from Morrison, who was now coordinating atmospheric energy development from a facility that moved continuously around the Earth's oceans, staying beyond the territorial waters of any single nation. Sarah, the latest reports show that atmospheric energy technology is now operational in 73 countries, with new installations coming online every week. Even the most aggressive suppression efforts have been unable to prevent the technology's spread. The message included updates on the legal consequences that had followed the Great Flight. Admiral Fletcher had been sentenced to life in prison for his role in the attempted assassination of an American citizen, while investigations into the Aegis Protocol had revealed decades of illegal collaboration between military officials and defense contractors. 3 senators had been expelled from Congress, and Titan Aerospace had been dissolved as a criminal enterprise after investigators discovered the full extent of their role in suppressing competing technologies. But Sarah also knew that her own legal status remained precarious. She was still technically a fugitive from multiple governments that considered her knowledge of atmospheric energy technology to be a national security threat. The Phoenix's capabilities allowed her to stay ahead of any pursuit, but they also meant that she could never return to a normal life in any country that was trying to control breakthrough technology. The irony wasn't lost on her that breaking aviation records had led to a life of permanent exile from the aviation community that had once celebrated her achievements. But watching the real-time feeds from atmospheric energy plants around the world, Sarah understood that the sacrifice had been worthwhile. The technology that she had first demonstrated during her record-breaking flight was now providing clean, unlimited power to billions of people who had previously lived in energy poverty. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's voice came through the communication system from a research facility orbiting Earth aboard a space station powered by atmospheric energy extraction. Sarah, the latest space-based installations are exceeding all performance projections. We're now generating enough power to support permanent colonies on Mars, the Moon, and several asteroid mining operations. The technology you proved could work is literally opening the solar system to human civilization. The space applications had been the most dramatic vindication of atmospheric energy technology's potential. Spacecraft could now extract unlimited fuel and power from planetary atmospheres, solar wind, and cosmic radiation, making interplanetary travel as economically viable as international airline flights had been before the Great Flight. The first permanent Mars colony was already under construction, powered entirely by atmospheric energy systems that extracted everything they needed from the Martian environment. But perhaps the most significant change had been in how governments around the world approached breakthrough technology. The global spread of atmospheric energy extraction had demonstrated that truly revolutionary advances couldn't be suppressed through traditional classification and control mechanisms. Research institutions had established international protocols for sharing breakthrough discoveries before any single government could claim exclusive control over them. Sarah's communication system displayed a message that made her smile for the first time in months. It was from Major David Park, who had been in the Valkyrie's cockpit during her original record-breaking flight and had since become a leading advocate for open, scientific research within the military establishment. Dr. Chen, I wanted you to know that the Air Force has officially declassified all research related to atmospheric energy extraction. Your demonstration proved that the technology was too important to be hidden from civilian science, and military leadership has decided that America's strategic advantage comes from leading development rather than suppressing it. The message included an official invitation for Sarah to return to the United States to lead a new Department of Energy research program focused on advancing atmospheric energy technology for humanitarian applications. The legal charges against her had been dropped, and she was being offered full protection from any remaining attempts at suppression or retaliation. Sarah studied the invitation with mixed emotions. After 2 years of living as a fugitive, the opportunity to return to legitimate scientific work was appealing. But she also understood that her role as guardian of breakthrough technology had become something larger than any single research program could encompass. The global network of independent research facilities that had grown from the Phoenix Protocol was developing advances that exceeded anything possible within conventional institutional structures. Professor Morrison's latest communication provided additional perspective on Sarah's situation. Dr. Chen, your demonstration that breakthrough technology could survive political suppression has fundamentally changed how scientific research operates around the world. Independent research networks are now developing advances in materials science, artificial intelligence, and biotechnology that would have been impossible under traditional government control systems. Your choice to fly the Phoenix has created a new model for how humanity can develop technology that benefits civilization rather than being controlled by political authorities. The implications of Morrison's observation were profound. The Great Flight had demonstrated more than just atmospheric energy extraction. It had proven that breakthrough technology could be developed and distributed despite the opposition of powerful interests that preferred to control scientific progress. The global research network that had grown from that demonstration was now advancing human knowledge in ways that transcended national boundaries and corporate limitations. As Sarah considered her options, she understood that her decision would influence how humanity developed technology for decades to come. She could return to conventional research within established institutions, accepting the limitations and oversight that came with official recognition. Or she could continue operating as an independent researcher, maintaining the freedom to develop breakthrough technology without political interference while remaining forever beyond the reach of normal society. The choice became clear as she watched real-time feeds from atmospheric energy installations around the world, providing unlimited clean power to communities that had never before had reliable electricity. The technology that she had first demonstrated during her record-breaking flight was eliminating energy poverty, enabling space exploration, and creating economic opportunities that were transforming human civilization. Sarah activated the Phoenix's communication system and recorded a message that would be transmitted to research institutions around the world. This is Dr. Sarah Chen, broadcasting from the Antarctic Research Facility. 2 years ago, I attempted to break aviation records and accidentally triggered a revolution in human energy technology. Today, I want to announce that the next phase of that revolution is about to begin. The message outlined plans for establishing atmospheric energy technology in Earth's oceans, developing space-based installations that could support interstellar exploration, and creating research networks that could advance human knowledge beyond the limitations imposed by political boundaries. The Phoenix Protocol had proven that breakthrough technology could survive suppression attempts, and now it was time to use that survival to benefit all of humanity. As Sarah prepared the Phoenix for another journey to research facilities around the world, She reflected on how completely her understanding of aviation had changed since the Great Flight. She had started that day hoping to demonstrate that aircraft could exceed existing performance limitations. Now she understood that the real limitations weren't technological. They were political systems that preferred to control breakthrough science rather than allow it to transform human civilization. The woman who had broken every flight record in 24 hours had become something far more significant, the catalyst for a transformation that had liberated human technology from the forces that preferred to suppress it. The future that she was now flying toward promised unlimited clean energy, practical space exploration, and scientific advances that could solve humanity's greatest challenges. Behind her, the world continued to change as atmospheric energy technology spread to new locations and applications. The revolution that had begun with a single flight was now unstoppable, carried forward by thousands of researchers who had learned that breakthrough technology belonged to humanity rather than to governments or corporations that wanted to control it for advantage. The flight that had started as an attempt to break aviation records had become the beginning of a new era in human development, and Sarah Chen had become its guardian, flying toward a future where the impossible had become routine and the boundaries of human achievement were limited only by imagination rather than political control. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.